So, guys, in our last episode, you can check it out right here. We did a deep dive into the counterfeiting space in the seeds supply chain market. Okay, so, what we're going to discuss today is in the same sector, but in a different segment. We're talking about agricultural inputs. Here, I'm referring to fertilizers, pesticides, I'm referring to insecticides, and I'm willing to, based on our research, I'm willing to bet that counterfeiting in this segment is a lot more than the seed supply chain. So, Vikas, can you just set up some context for our listeners, brand managers, marketing heads, consumers, as to why it's so dangerous counterfeiting in this space and why it's a lot larger than the seed supply chain?
Yeah. So talk about insecticides, pesticides in particular, right? As compared to seeds, and both contribute towards being agri inputs, especially for a farmer, right? And these are what basically ends up being used to help him grow the produce, whatever they are trying to produce, right? And then if you look at pesticides, insecticides, herbicides, all of these are, most of these formulas are patented, which means only certain companies which can make them. So obviously when certain, aspects of a products have an IP to it, the probability of it being counterfeited is actually much more, right? So specifically in this case of pesticides, insecticides, we've seen a lot more companies. So a certain company will have a patent around one particular formula versus another company would have a patent around another formula, which will work, differently with different soil conditions, different conditions, right? So we've seen specifically, let's say if a company manufactures a particular insecticide, it's very likely that insecticides works really well in particular region, right? And then hence it tends to get used a lot. So the chances of a counterfeiter capitalizing on that is much more. And that's what we've seen. I mean, as compared to seeds, seeds are also very much counterfeited. But as compared to seeds, pesticides, your insecticides, your herbicides, etc., fertilizers as well, definitely would have a higher percentage points in terms of the counterfeiting that we see.
Okay. So let's start with the first point, which is, we're trying to understand the prevalence of counterfeiting in this agri inputs. So based on what you guys have done and what you've seen in the market, interacted with these brands, how has counterfeiting shown itself? At what level of the supply chain has it shown itself? Typically, how have you seen counterfeiters, try and replicate these products and patents?
Yeah. So, a lot of it happens in the supply chain itself, right? If you start from the manufacturer, it travels through a warehouse, it goes to different distributors, finally ends up in the hands of a retailer, and then eventually in the hand of a farmer. So the product would have already exchanged multiple hands while it gets to a farmer. So the probability of counterfeit being introduced in the supply chain in that case is higher because the number of nodes involved are much higher. And especially in this case, like I already mentioned, right, there is a scope of counterfeiting being much high, given, the IP is very much focused around a few players. The counterfeiter stands to benefit by counterfeiting one or the two other, brands or one of the two formulas as well, right? And also a lot of this manufacturing is also outsourced. So while a brand itself might be doing a part of the manufacturing, certain of the formulas might be outsourced to other players. So which also means that there is a lot of other third parties involved in this case. So given there are so many players involved, given the money involved, given that the counterfeiter stands to make a lot from counterfeiting pesticides, there is going to be a huge amount of counterfeiting that happens in this case.
Now, you mentioned that there's a lot of outsourced manufacturing going on in this space. If it's a farmer, the product is coming from
the brand
from a brand versus I'm buying a counterfeited product. How is it really affecting my output or my production if it comes from the same factory?
Okay, so while a brand definitely would follow certain guidelines, will follow the regulations in terms of the chemicals. Imagine that each and every label that you make for insecticide has to be verified by the department. So the labels, the content of the label itself is verified. And of course, even the product has to be verified and, certified as well, right? So a lot of science goes behind in ensuring that, whatever chemical composition is mentioned on the label is actually correctly in the product as well. But a counterfeiter would not care about this, right? A counterfeiter is mostly worried about making quick buck. That's what he or she is worried about. And which also means they would compromise a lot of these standards or quality parameters which are very much required, ensuring that there is good quality of crop produce, that ensuring that the farm itself is not harmed, ensuring that there is no carcinogenic substances in this which could lead to diseases like cancer, etc. So
wait. So coming back to this, when you say lead to diseases but like cancer, etc., can you elaborate a bit more?
I mean, I'm not sure if you're aware, but there was a case study where certain cotton farmers ended up basically being affected by the pesticides that they were using, which was found to be fake, and which also led to a lot of infertility around in the area. And then almost there was a generation where they couldn't have, the whole generation did not have kids. So you can imagine the consequences that fake pesticides, fake insecticides could lead to. And apart from health concerns, of course, for a farmer, they're using pesticides to ensure that the pests don't grow. If a pesticide is not effective, obviously the pest will grow and affect the produce as well. Or if it's over effective, it'll not only reduce, may reduce your yield, but also, affect your soil as well. So It might kill the healthier, rather important pests or insects which you need for, the plant growth to happen. So some of these aspects are very important. So everybody stands to lose when a counterfeiter counterfeits pesticides and insecticides, because end of the day, you are also eating the produce that is grown from these harmful, chemicals. And when you're consuming
something unregulated, you're consuming.
Obviously, it's unregulated.
It will become a humicide, whatever.
Yeah, so homicide.
Yeah.
So basically, it could end up leading huge issues to your human health as well, right? So that's where things end up.
So even if it's being made by similar factories or same region or whatever it is, counterfeiter probably is doing unregulated stuff. And this is a very regulated market is what I understand.
Yes. So these are regulated markets for sure, right? I mean, if you look at it, these are chemicals, firstly. Secondly, they are getting into food, which ends up into the food chain, right? So obviously, these are going to be very regulated. Having said that, like you rightly mentioned, counterfeiters don't care about it, even though they might buy it from the same factory, which is making it very unlikely that the same factory might do it, because the factories which are basically doing outsourced manufacturing as well, they are also very highly regulated.
Oh, okay.
So they go through regular audits, all of that happens. But still, obviously, there are occasions where there are opportunities where counterfeiters might take advantage of it, or even the factory might take advantage of the fact that they are aware of the formula, they are aware of a lot of things. So they might also be aware of the packaging. So a lot of these things come into play. Having said that, a counterfeiter might just set up a factory where they might start manufacturing fake pesticides, fake chemicals, need not care about the composition at all, need not care about the standard quality parameters, need not worry about the harmful substances that might go into the product itself. And eventually, you can imagine the consequences that it will lead to.
Interesting. Okay. And as I understand correctly, despite it being a heavily regulated space, counterfeiting is prevalent. Any numbers or data?
I mean, the estimate is around 30 to 40% of pesticides, insecticides that get counterfeited.
Wow.
It is a big problem. I mean, it's been a huge problem since quite some time. The government has also tried to take steps to curb counterfeiting in this industry.
Okay.
They made it mandatory for products to carry some kind of unique element like a QR code or something, right? We'll talk later about what are the benefits or pros and cons of using a QR code, and if there's something better than that later. But yeah, government is taking steps. There is a huge amount of counterfeiting that happens. The retailers, the distributors might be involved as well. So if you look at it that way, it's a huge problem which a lot of us don't understand. I mean, even though we are 19 to 20% of our GDP comes from agriculture, a good amount of our people are involved in agriculture, etc. A lot of us don't understand that, there is a huge amount of counterfeiting that happens in this space, right? Only when it affects us, then that's when the noise is made. But, it's hugely prevalent in agriculture. It's very much prevalent in this particular industry itself. And it's very important that steps are taken to curb this.
And this is not just for food, it's for cotton, I'm assuming it's for other things as well.
Any crop, right? Any crop which grows, where pesticides are used, insecticides are used, could be crop, could be any other, material. may not be food, could be, which is something which gets used in textile industry as well. Anything like that is, where pesticides are used will have a prevalence of counterfeits.
Okay. So let's move on to my next question. We spoke about the human impact, the impact on farmers, the impact on the people who end up eating food which has the wrong dosage or the wrong chemicals in insecticide and pesticide. And I'm sure insecticide and pesticide these days and fertilizers have got a very bad rep. And I'm willing to bet that one of the reasons is probably counterfeit chemicals, because they're heavily regulated industry. So, when they get a bad rep, I initially thought that, the brands are only screwing up. But then for them, it's bad that insecticide pesticides get a bad name. And it's probably what you said, 30-40% is counterfeit. Yeah. That's a significant portion of agricultural inputs.
Yes.
So I was keeping that aside, the human impact aside. Let's talk about the economic impact for the brand, for the government, for the farmer, when they end up buying something counterfeit. So can you take us through that?
I mean, if you look at the brands stand to lose because instead of your product, now a fake product is being bought.
On your name.
On your name. So one, they lose out on the sale, which has happened. They, of course, lose out on the money that they would have made. More importantly, if the product ends up not meeting the expectation of the farmer, you also tend to lose on that loyalty as well, which you would have built and which you have spent so much on cultivating. Brands losing out on loyalty and, of course, your sales. Now, a consumer who's purchased a fake product obviously stands to lose a lot. Of course, they lost money because they purchased a fake product, assuming it was a genuine product. It's not worth the money you spent. And now you go and use that product. Obviously, the impact of that product is not going to be as much as what the original product would have brought you, right? So in this specific case, pests would not get killed. Insects would not get killed. Your fungus or whatever it is that you're trying to use these insecticides or pesticides for will not obviously be effective.
Fertilizer will not end up helping it grow.
Absolutely. So it will not help them meet the yield that they are planning to have. And then it could also lead to consequences where even the soil starts getting affected. So it has long-term consequences for a consumer. For the government, is loss of taxes. Obviously, if you are purchasing a genuine product,
it'll be taxed correctly.
It's going to be taxed correctly. The money, there's going to be a right amount of money flow to the government. But counterfeit products are not sold through the right channels. They're obviously sold through cash transactions. A lot of these are undervalued and all of that happens. So government tends to lose on.
They lose out on taxes, of course.
So lose out on taxes. And very importantly, also, let's talk about subsidies, right? Worldwide, $1.8 trillion of subsidies are given out every year on agriculture inputs. So if you look at it that way, a lot of that money, 30% of it, if it's pigs, 30% of it is going to the wrong hands.
Yeah, it's horrible.
So, there's loss everywhere. Loss in terms of revenue, money consumers get to lose. And down the chain, you can think about even consumption when you are consuming these products. Sometimes some of these crops are grown for your livestock, right? For animals, right? For feeding the animals like cows, etc. And even they tend to lose, their health gets affected. And now let's say you're drinking their milk. So at the end of the day, humans, animals, everybody's affected.
If there was a personification in the economic space for a parasite, this would literally be it.
Absolutely, right? I mean, a lot of that money ends up in the wrong hands as well. Not just that. It's a parasite. It's a terrorist parasite, if you want to call it that way. Because it's not just eating up on the resources, but it's also using that resources to harm you back.
Can you give me an example?
So, a lot of that money eventually which is made goes in the wrong hands. Obviously, a lot of the people involved in counterfeiting are involved in criminal activities as well. So the money not just now gets taken away from the rightful hands, but now also ending up in wrongful hands. So now they are going to use this money for trafficking, terrorism, and all of these illegal activities that you can think of.
So guys, this is not just something we're making up. I'll leave links in the description of real articles of studies done by the UN, by various other bodies, stating how counterfeiting actually ends up funding terrorism in a lot of different countries in the world. So we have actually done a video of this in the past as well. I'll see if I can link that also in the description. But yeah, moving on, Vikas. So to conclude, like the economic impact, it's not just limited to economics, is what you're trying to say. There's societal impact.
Absolutely. So economical, societal, health, you want to think of it, counterfeiting has large long-term consequences and large consequences as well. So it is an important topic to discuss, and it's very important that people, not just companies but even consumers, are aware of it, so that there is enough pressure on everybody to ensure that counterfeiting is curbed. That's also important that your consumers are also educated about the effects of counterfeiting. Sometimes consumers buy products knowingly as well in other sectors, but I'm sure in this case that's not the case, right? I'm sure.
I don't think a farmer would ever knowingly want to buy counterfeit stuff.
I'm sure if it's a purse or a wallet, I'm sure people would do that. But in this case, it's not, right? A farmer is not buying something knowingly that that's not effective. It's not going to be effective.
Right.
It's a counterfeited product.
Yeah.
So here it's why it's so much important to ensure that doesn't happen.
So let's move on to. I hope you've got a context, guys, that agricultural input space, one of the worst areas which is affected by counterfeiting. Brands, government, farmer, consumer, everyone is terribly impacted just to serve one counterfeiter trying to make a quick buck. And let's move on to, addressing this challenge. So first, let's start with understanding technologies which have been implemented by the government, by brands, which you guys have built to help solve this problem.
So, there are a lot of technologies that are, in place. So if I want to specifically talk about, there is software which could be used. There is identification technology that could be used. Of course, there are barcodes which, let's go back then. So if you go back a few years, the first thing that people wanted to do is create some kind of identification for the brand itself. So when I look at it, I can identify it's from the brand, from the rightful brand. As simple as having the right kind of colors, packaging, some kind of barcode on it, etc. But then eventually people obviously started replicating that as well. They were able to replicate the exact packaging, the colors, etc. So then people moved on to using holograms, other aspects. They also tried different ways of adding certain markers, changing packaging regularly so that people are not able to replicate it as and when these guys change it. But then, obviously counterfeiters have caught up. It's very easy to replicate a packaging, very easy to create a label, etc. So now there are technologies which use some kind of a unique identification. Could be like a QR code, or could be an advanced QR code, or could be a non-clonable code as well, which cannot be replicated, which go on this packaging and which people can verify at the time of purchase as well. And of course, there are talks about using electronic components as well inside the packaging, which sometimes could be expensive. And this specific case, if it's an expensive insecticide or a pesticide, it might work. But in other cases, it may not work. And
You're referring to something like an RFID?
RFID or NFC tag. It may not be economical for somebody to use that. And now there are talks about delivering pesticides directly to the crops by the companies. So companies are planning to basically use drones to deliver the pesticides directly to the crops, to the farmer, not having to go through any of the distribution chain. So that's probably also something which could help curb counterfeiting as well.
Interesting. Okay. And anything the government has tried to do?
Yeah. So like we mentioned, government has introduced regulation mandating some kind of a QR code or a 2D code to be affixed on each and every pack. And that 2D code should carry some elements, some information about the product itself, so that anybody can verify at any point of time. But is it effective? I doubt so. Because what is being used is a simple 2D code, QR code. And if you use a smartphone, I can basically use the phone, scan the code, get the details which are embedded in the code, create another code just like that and reprint it, right? So it may solve the problem to some extent, but I don't think it's a holy grail. We need something much more effective, which basically prevents even a single copy or a single unit of a pesticide to be prevent that from being counterfeited. Yeah.
So now let's talk about. So I think this is something which you guys we've tried to solve at Aquis, right?
Absolutely.
So can you educate a little bit on what was the thought process behind it and how you've designed the system for this industry?
So like I mentioned, right, 2D codes, QR codes, unique codes will help you solve the problem to some extent. But if I replicate it, I can basically replicate it to some extent, and then be able to at least sell 2 or 3 units of that product. which makes it difficult still. But then our vision was to even prevent a single unit of a product from being replicated or duplicated.
So guys, to give you some context, a counterfeiter is like a hacker who's operating in a software space. A counterfeiter is operating in the real world, in the manufacturing or these areas. And when he says they'll be able to replicate a simple 2D code, what he's referring to is something you can do yourself. Scan a QR code, copy the QR code data which comes on your smartphone, paste it into any QR code generator. You will get another QR code which will read the same output.
Correct.
So that's what he's referring to. So now, so the vision at Acquis was even this should not be possible.
Absolutely, right. Even preventing a single unit from being replicated is what what drives us. So, we've been having this vision of ensuring that even a single product cannot be replicated. So we built something called as a non-clonable code. So which means even a single code or a single label cannot be copied. And if it is, it can be identified. And that's a vision which drives us. And we also understand that it's a cat and mouse game. So we might build something now which could later be broken by a counterfeiter. Right. Like you rightly said, they are hackers, right? It's a cat and mouse game, just like a virus, antivirus. You build an antivirus program, a new virus might come in. So we do keep innovating. We understand that just by having one solution is not going to work. We need to build on top of our solutions. We need to keep improving the solutions that we have so that we are always a step ahead of counterfeiters, always a step ahead of what they think and how they think. So we use the latest technology. We use the latest printing technology. We use the latest encoding technology, latest AI, ML technologies. We also use, sometimes we also use blockchain. We use computer vision. So we use a combination of all that is available to us in ensuring that we're able to give a solution that is foolproof against counterfeiting completely. And not just, using codes which could be replicated or using a method which prevent in a large scale, which might prevent counterfeiting at a large scale, but at least might still allow counterfeiting to happen at a smaller scale. So we basically want to ensure that even that is completely curbed.
So you use a lot of, what the audience would consider jargons here.
Yeah.
So can you give like a little example of how this is implemented? So one of the reasons I want to bring this up is I remember that in 2021, 2022, when blockchain was getting all the rage, you had mentioned to me that you had implemented blockchain already for, in 2017, 18 itself in a lot of companies. And you were quite surprised, like, why is this catching on now? Can you just educate a little bit more in a technical perspective, like how you've implemented this with an example? So we've done this for coffee.
Okay. So first I want to mention that, blockchain is not the solution, right? It's one of the aspects of the solution. And blockchain itself is not going to solve the problem of counterfeiting. Okay. What blockchain does is helps you ensure that your data, is basically prevented from being replicated easily. The data is well protected. And also the fact that nobody can tamper with the data. So that, when you are working on the data, it can be trusted by everybody who's part of the network. So what is blockchain? If I explain it to you clearly, you probably might understand what I'm trying to say. So think of blockchain as a system where everybody owns the data and everybody has a copy of the ledger. So we use a term called ledger very commonly in blockchain. So ledger is nothing but a record of transactions, right? So imagine the current system, right? A bank has a record of a transaction. Nobody else knows, or you might know it, right? But in case of blockchain, that record of transactions is shared across the network. So everybody has a record. So now if I tamper with it, the system doesn't allow me to tamper with it, because if I tamper, I'm only tampering with my copy of that.
So how did you implement it?
So what we did was, we realized that, we could use this system in ensuring that, we can bring in people who do not trust each other. So in a coffee network, where there are multiple people involved, obviously there was lack of trust. There was a question about data as well.
So multiple people as in farmers.
Could be your farmers, your processors, your processing unit. It could also be government. Now we are talking about European regulations which have come into place which prevent them from buying any produce which comes from a deforested area. So how can they verify that? So all of these people are involved. And how can we share data across them without
getting it tampered?
Without getting it tampered, without them having to worry that it's been tampered, and without them having to basically think that it's being controlled by some single unit, because now everybody has a copy, everybody controls it. So that's how we did it. So we used blockchain. Like I said, blockchain doesn't solve the problem itself of counterfeiting, but it kind of helps in solving the problem. So we basically, what we did was, every transaction that happened on the coffee network, so when, let's say, a coffee moved from the farm to the FPO, we capture that on the network.
FPO is for
it's a
our
farmer
audience?
producers organization. Basically, it's a collective.
It's a collective.
Collective. So if it moves from the farm to the collective, we capture that transaction, and from the collective to the processing unit, we capture that. At any point of time, we know that this product went through this supply chain, went through these nodes, went through these players. We also capture all the parameters across the supply chain. So the moisture content, the outturns, all of these are parameters about the produce of coffee specifically, and all these parameters are captured, and this is what are available. So blockchain helps in that sense, right? So like I said, we use multiple of technologies in ensuring that counterfeiting is prevented, and there is trust in the network, trust in the supply chain, and that's what we are trying to do.
So you spoke about an example of the entire network, but let's specifically talk about the discussion we were having, which is insecticides and pesticides. The agricultural inputs. So you've worked with some brands, of course.
Yes.
And what kind of implementation you've done for them in protecting them?
So we've done multiple implementations. We've helped them, of course, use our anti-counterfeiting technologies, what I'm talking about, preventing, counterfeits. We help them also satisfy or, manage the government regulations, ensure that they are able to completely conform to the regulations. We also help them build systems, or rather use our systems to trace the product to their supply chain, so that tomorrow if a product comes back or if it's tampered with, they know exactly the source of it. We also help them manage their warehouse track and trace, so that when a product moves through a warehouse, when it comes in and when it goes out, we also help them track that as well. Of course, automate a lot of that factories in order to enable track and trace and authentication is what we do.
When you say automate the factories, can you give me I didn't understand.
Okay, great. When I say automation, I don't mean complete automation of the factory. What I meant was basically providing them systems which basically make it easy for them to enable a track and trace system on the products. So think of it this way: when a product gets made, there are various levels of the products. So we have a basic level, the first unit of packaging, which is called a primary. There's a secondary unit of packaging, which is basically a bigger box, a shipper box, which then go into a pallet. Right. So all of that is something which was currently being manually done.
Oh, okay.
So wherein they were pasting a label on the primary unit, and then they were doing something on the secondary, and then they were doing something on the tertiary, and these three were also not mapped. If I got hold of the tertiary packaging of the pallet, I would not know what exactly is inside that, all the contents, and I would not, if I got hold of the secondary unit, I'll not know exactly what is inside that. So what we've done is we built a system which basically, right from your primary unit when it's made, and then now when it gets packed into the secondary, we also not just create unique identifiers which for each of these levels, but also create mapping between them. We also marry them to each other. So when any level is verified or scanned or checked, we'll not just get to know the description of that particular level, but also get to know at the lower level what is the contents. If I'm scanning a pallet, I'll get to know about the shipper boxes or the bigger boxes. If I'm scanning the shipper box, I'll get to know about the primary units. So I'll get a lot of details about everything, right? And this is what is further used for track and trace. When the product now moves to the supply chain, I can track at any level how the product is moving and where it's going to. And now if it comes back to me as well as a sales return, I can also track that. So it kind of helps them understand how the product is moving, where it's moving, and how it's moving as well.
And the sales return part you mentioned, but I'm assuming also that if a brand has a comprehensive dealer and distributor network, it helps you map these things to those specific people also.
Absolutely. So what we also done is in our product, we also have systems in place which basically allow a certain product only move through a certain chain. So if a distributor is responsible for a certain product, only he'll be allowed to carry that product, and our software can basically enable that. Which also means pilferage, which happens quite commonly.
Yeah.
Where a product from Maharashtra, which is only to be sold in Maharashtra, ends up being sold in Karnataka as well.
Because of the rate. So guys, in the distributor dealer network, this is called as undercutting.
Yeah, absolutely. It's quite common, right?
Yeah,
so,
it's quite common.
That also gets prevented through the system.
I mean, one of the reasons I know it, one of the reasons Vikas also can talk about it, is our networks is around a lot of traders.
Yeah.
And I can tell you, traders are always looking to undercut each other.
yeah, that's true. So, there's obviously these opportunities which are available where,
there's a demand for the product.
There's a demand for the product, and a certain product in a certain region is available at a lower price. So, yeah.
So, in a way, you're not just eliminating the pilferage, but the dealers and distributors who are doing genuine business, you're helping them protect their own sales as well, right?
Absolutely.
So it's not just the brand, but the dealer and distributor in specific regions, if they face a lot of pilferage, I mean, if they face a lot of undercutting and all, you can actually prevent that with your system.
So think of it this way: if I have to tell you in a nutshell, who was honest, who was doing the business the right way, stands to benefit a lot from such systems. And obviously, people who are not being honest tends to lose as well.
Yeah.
So the idea of anybody using a system like this is ensuring that, like you rightly mentioned, if I'm an honest distributor and I'm being undercut by somebody else, then obviously it helps me ensure that doesn't happen anymore.
It does ruin the relation of an honest distributor with the brand when this happens.
Absolutely. And it's not easy for a brand to confront the distributor which is actually undercutting as well. So, this is, you're getting the work done without actually even having to confront them, because by using a system, you're kind of sending a signal that you're not going to tolerate this, but then you don't need to confront them or don't need to actually sit across a table and discuss with them, right? You're kind of bringing in a system to prevent them from, ground zero itself. Yeah.
So let's move on to the next question. You spoke about, how technology has helped you, helped the brands you work with also, prevent a lot of counterfeiting, even in this space. I have a question, and I wonder if brands ask you this when you go talk to them. So for all the brand managers and brand protection heads out there, I'm doing this for you. So the question is, boss, my consumer is a farmer. वो क्या verify करेगा?
Yeah.
उसको थोड़ी पता चलेगा ये सब.
True.
Right? So, I mean, how have you empowered the farmer, and how do you answer this or address this? The assumption that, the farmer is not smart enough to figure out these codes and all that.
So that's a very common question that we get asked, not just when we're selling to agriculture, agri-input companies, but, other industries as well. The problem is, even though there may be some element of truth to this, the problem is a lot of us underestimate, the farmers or, blue-collar workers, right? A lot of things have changed. The advent of smartphones, data connectivity is quite prevalent across India right now, or globally itself, right?
Thank you, Ambani ji.
Yeah, definitely. I think Jio definitely has brought a lot of change in that. So while you sit in armchairs and wonder that whether farmers actually would be able to use technology, you'll be surprised. So we've seen a lot of our customers, their customers are consumers, are farmers. We've seen a good usage of our technology. Plus,
can you share some numbers, some percentage of all the packages sold, how many end up getting verified and all?
So close to, there are two components here. If you do add an incentive program to it, like, if you do give some incentives on top of verifications, like now you're verifying my product, I'll also share some cashback or rewards to you, which probably will end up in a UPI wallet or a bank wallet. We've seen close to 80 to 90% verifications happen.
Wow.
And if you don't give that incentive, obviously it's on a lower side. But having said that, farmers are educated these days, and having seen this happen for the last few years, they tend to verify. We, in fact, do get a lot of calls sometimes from farmers. If a pack doesn't have this, our label or our technology on it, sometimes the farmers do call us and say, hey, should we buy this or not? Right? And farmers, and every time a fake product is found, there is an escalation made all the way back to the director of the agri-input companies, right? So we do get emails sometimes saying a farmer is scanning this and he's seeing that the product is being called a duplicate. So,
right. Oh, wait. So I forgot to ask this completely. Sorry to divert here, but when someone scans and there's a duplicate, so what do you typically do? Like, what do you tell the brand, and what all information do we give them?
So one, of course, the consumer gets to know
It's a fake product.
It's a fake product.
Right.
And I want to tie into your previous question as well. Right? We've also done is we've added in multiple languages, especially across India. You see, various languages are used. So to be able to make it easy for a farmer to understand what's happening, it's in a different language. It's in their native language as well. So one, they get to know it's a fake product. Secondly, there's also information available on how they can reach out to the brand and take the necessary steps. And obviously, they'll be able to return the product, etc., and get full refund for it. So that's something which a brand has made available for the consumer. So that's what happens. The brand is now empowering the consumer as well in taking the rightful steps. So now the consumer also feels empowered, say, okay, not just get to know it's a fake product,
I'll
but
get
also
an incentive also. It ties into loyalty.
It ties into loyalty, as well, because now you're verifying, you're also giving that information back to the brand. Now, brand also stands to benefit because they can also now do a deep dive and understand what the source of these fake products are. Right. Because once a fake product is discovered, it makes it easy for them to also go back and understand where the source is. So it does really help the brand when a farmer is able to report the fake product.
And when that happens, you give them information of what all, like what information?
What we give is a dashboard which a brand has complete control over. So they get all the information that is needed. Right? Who the farmer was, which location it was, if the farmer has shared the location, and the product itself which was counterfeited. So
and if they've taken track and trace which retailer.
So which retailer it got
probably was.
Probably was as well, like rather where the genuine product was to be sold through, but now a fake product is being purchased. So you can also tie in and understand whether the fake product was coming from the same retailer. So now that maybe there's something wrong happening at the retailer end as well. So
there's an important question here. Do you do this on Acquis app, or does the brand have their own app? How does that work?
So the distribution model for us is multifold. You can either get Acquis app, or you can have a brand app, wherein we provide our library to the brand, which they can integrate in their app. Or we could also provide a white label app as well, right? So there are multiple ways in which the distribution of the technology happens.
And you guys have taken care of all the financial compliance for giving cashbacks and all of that as well.
Yeah. So in terms of financial compliances, we're just a platform. The cashback goes from the brand to the consumer.
Right.
So we're just enabling that. So that's how it is. Yeah.
Okay. Let's move on. So guys, I hope you got a picture of how we've tried to solve this problem at Acquis. And if you have any other questions about this, you can definitely ask us in the comment section below. As a consumer, as a farmer, as a brand, please comment section mein comment kijiye. We'll definitely answer it for you. But let's move on to the next part. You spoke a lot about these measures. I want to understand what are reactive measures in your implementation, or what happens in the market, and what are preventive measures, for counterfeiting in this market.
So what we do, or what we provide at Acquis, is preventive, right? Okay. And what a lot of companies have been doing so far is reactive, right? What happens in case of reactive is, let's say their sales team would be obviously, doing a lot of field visits, and they do discover a fake product somewhere. Then the fake product is reported back to the team, the regulation team or the legal team, which then sends out a raid team to the location to raid the premises, get hold of the fake products, run investigations behind it. So that's the reactive approach, which is obviously not an efficient approach, because one, the product's already out there in the shelf. A purchase might have already happened.
Right. Farmer ka to gaya seed.
Exactly. Right. Farmer would have already purchased. You don't know who's already purchased it.
Right.
And you don't know how many quantities of it has already gone out in the market. Right. So a lot of these things would happen. So preventive approach, reactive approach might help you in a short term, might help you here and there, but it's not a foolproof approach. So that's when you need a preventive approach, so that one, you're not just enabling the farmer to verify what they're buying, so that at the time of purchase itself, they can take a rightful decision, but also sending a strong signal to a counterfeiter saying, hey, we are doing something about it. So now the counterfeiter is also not, going to be comfortable, or rather you're making it very economically unviable for a counterfeiter to also, replicate something like this or counterfeit products. So now you're sending signals, preventing fake products from being in the shelf, and also preventing a consumer or a farmer to buy a fake product at the time of purchase itself.
Okay. Now let's move on to the next part. We discussed about the role of brand, of technology, of the farmer himself, to try to avoid buying the wrong kind of goods. Uh, what would you recommend, for this industry, for the Indian farmers, because that's the end, consumer for agricultural input. What strategy should a brand apply, to protect their brand, to protect the farmer? And how do you build out that community and ensure that they're educated?
So, it has to be multifold, multi-pronged strategy. It cannot be just one approach which will prevent counterfeiting. You obviously have to use technology. You'll have to use non-clonable markers on your packaging. You'll have to educate your farmer so that they can verify at the time of purchase. You'll obviously also have to work on your design packaging to some extent. While it may not solve the problem, at least keeps you a step ahead of the counterfeiter. You obviously also want to ensure that you're compliant with the regulations that the government has made. Even though the government regulations, like I mentioned, are not really effectively solving the problem, but you could use that as a base, and on top of it, you can further enhance the capabilities of the anti-counterfeiting measures that you've taken. Plus, also very importantly, that while the world is moving towards technology, be open to that. Like I said, there are various ways in which your product can be delivered. Be open to ensuring that you're able to deliver products in a different way itself, so that you don't have to go through the traditional route. And also now, there is demand for biopesticides as well, because chemical-based pesticides are obviously harming the environment, etc. So when you're talking about biopesticides, obviously you need to be able to also ensure that you're using technology even in that sector, so that right when the world moves towards that, you're also well prepared in terms of ensuring that even that doesn't get counterfeited. So it has to be a multi-pronged approach. Marketing, sales, your quality team has to be involved.
Communications,
the whole
education of the community.
Absolutely. And your regulation team is also involved, because then it's very important that you're able to take a message back to the government as well, saying, okay, what you are asking us to do is good, but it's not foolproof. Why don't we do something else, right? So what the government is asking of brands to do right now is not completely foolproof. It's a right step. I'm sure
the government
is going to improve on it.
Right.
I'm sure the step was taken to bring everybody into the fold of technology, getting them to open up towards technology. I'm sure that's probably was a reason behind it. But I think we need to go a step beyond that now. And along with this, I think it's very important that your distribution chain is also they work as a partner, and ensuring that counterfeiting is prevented. And it's very important that you're able to incentivize them as well. So if you're able to give them incentives, for selling your product, for working with you in ensuring that consumers get genuine products, I think the brand should look at incentivizing them. I think there are already some programs being run, in a lot of the brands do that, specifically for retailers, distributors as well.
Can you give an example of how it's implemented, or how you guys have implemented for some brands?
So it's very simple. When they buy, obviously when retailers or distributors buy your product, it's not going to be a single unit. It's going to be a pack of units. So the bigger boxes, or shipper boxes that we call, that's what they buy. And what we've done is we enable loyalty or rewards on the shipper box. So when they buy a shipper box and they verify it, not just they get to know it's a genuine product. Obviously, they get to understand the chain, the provenance. They also are, given rewards on the app that they, when they scan from. So the app shows them rewards, which then they can use it for, obviously the method which the brand would have described.
So essentially, you're telling the entire if you want to really address this counterfeiting problem, you have to look at the entire ecosystem.
It has to be, right? You need to make sure that the players are involved. You make it economically rightful for everybody to sell genuine products, and obviously not look towards fake products in trying to make a quick buck. So I think when everybody is involved, the whole chain is involved, you're able to be more successful than when there are people who are not part of this system, or the network, or the technology itself which you're trying to market or bring into place.
Okay. So let's move on. Let's look at what do you think the future holds? Future trends in counterfeit prevention, brand protection. What do you think is going to change from a technology perspective, from a market perspective? How do we ensure that this entire corruption or counterfeiting thing which exists in the agri input specifically. Our first episode was also about agri inputs, about seeds.
Right.
And this time it's about fertilizers, insecticides, pesticides. Like, how do we really make sure that we are ahead of the curve of these real world hackers?
Like I said, it's a cat and mouse game. There's obviously going to be innovation, which is going to be very important, that is going to be needed. And I think there are companies which are innovating. There are non-clonable technologies. There are electronic-based counterfeit prevention methods which could be incorporated. There's a lot of innovation happening in packaging as well. There's innovation on the hologram sector as well, where holograms were originally brought in to prevent counterfeiting. So there's a lot of nano holograms. We talk about color changing holograms. There's a lot of technology which has come in. So it has to be a combination of all of this, and along with that, your communication, your marketing, which ties into this, which will ensure that the consumer is well aware of what you are trying to convey through your packaging, through your products, and only then it's going to be effective. So there is technology. There's AI, there's ML, there's computer vision. These are basically new terms to old technologies. But then there's a lot of advancements which have happened in this field. So I think a lot of these technologies which will influence the counterfeiting mechanisms that are actually being used right now. So in a nutshell, if I have to call it, three things: packaging, technology, and marketing communications. Yeah.
Right. Now, let's move on to, there's a last question I have for you. And a lot of what you're saying, because it's an ecosystem play, technology is one of the aspects, one of the pieces of the puzzle. If I'm a brand head or I'm a brand protection head, if I'm a director of a brand or I'm a brand protection head, why should I give so much time to this? Well, how does it affect my bottom line? Like, why should I even worry about this so much? The picture you're painting, it seems grim, but why does it require so much intent for me to solve?
30% of pesticides, like I said, are being counterfeited. So imagine, that 30% could be affecting your brand as well. So 30% of your revenues are now being siphoned out. That's a huge number. So if you can bring that back to your revenues, it's going to make a lot of difference to your brand and your company as well. So firstly, that. Secondly, the consequences of somebody selling fake goods in your brand name.
Do I have legal consequences of that?
It's a gray area. But having said that, the brand consequences in terms of losing out a customer, because now I purchased a product assuming it's your brand, and obviously I'm not going to be happy about it. So tomorrow, even though there are no legal consequences here, I'm sure a lot of other countries are trying to bring in legislation where the brand may be responsible for a fake sold in its name, right? So in India, it's still not in place, and I'm sure where if you do follow other countries, it might come in place as well. So as a brand manager, it's very important that revenue, brand loyalty, and thirdly, and very importantly, now if you are worried about the environment, if you're worried about human life,
which guys, I can't believe we have to mention this, but I know a lot of CFOs who don't think like that. So, but yeah, please.
And thirdly, and very importantly, if you're worried about human life, the consequences that fake products cause to human health or animal health or environmental health. And today we are talking about climate change. Everybody's trying to bring in methods to show their own brand as very climate conscious, etc.
An ESG brands, right?
It's very important that you do bring in measures to prevent counterfeits, because counterfeits cause a lot of harm to health, human health, animal health, and environment as well. So while some people might think it's not important, I think it's very important, and there's a lot of focus across the globe around, like rightly said, ESG, right? And there's a lot of focus on ensuring that you are a brand which stands for the right thing and a right cause. So as a company, revenue, loyalty, and obviously, the effects that fake products cause, and you would want to obviously prevent that from happening.
So guys, there you have it. We've covered the agriculture inputs from seeds in our previous episode to in this episode, fertilizers, insecticides, and pesticides. I hope you've got an understanding of the entire supply chain, how it affects you personally. As consumers, you can demand your brand that, hey, I want to know where this has come from, and if it is grown right, if it's good for the environment, if it's healthy, if it doesn't have any harmful contaminants. And it starts from there. But as a brand as well, how you can, show a significant increase in your bottom line just by preventing counterfeiting. And we actually have case studies for this. We'll try to link some in the description where some of the brands have seen significant jump in sales, not because they did anything new, but because sales which were counterfeited started coming in real, because it was all regulated now and it was all powered by tech. So hope you enjoyed this episode. Do subscribe to Aquis for more future updates like this. And if you have questions for Vikas, you can let us know in the comment section below. He's worked with companies across the sector, not just agriculture and seeds. We'll be having conversations about those specific sectors as well, including your favorite luxury brands and how they protect themselves.
Yeah.
So do let us know if you have any questions and if you want us to cover any specific industry first. One which we are looking to cover soon, if you want to subscribe and you want to know, we'll be looking to cover nutraceuticals and supplement industry next, which I think is a big place for a lot of scams. And that's a growing sector in India. And then we'll be covering pharmaceuticals soon as well. So thank you so much for watching. See you all in our next episode. Bye-bye.